Welcome to Truth Stream, ladies and gentlemen. We are here with the lovely Michelle Fielding once again. It's been a little bit too long, and we're going to cover a lot of unique, cool topics, current events, and using her intuition and the other skills and tools that she uses. She may talk about what those are. She may not. But anyway, welcome to the show, Michelle.
Yeah, so good to see you again.
Hi, Joe and Scott. It's been a little while, hasn't it? We've got a lot to catch up on today. Nice to see you both.
You too.
Great to see you too, yeah.
Yes, looking radiant as usual.
Thank you.
Yes. So where should we start? You know, it's been a little while. There's so many current events. We're now in October, and we've heard over the last few years Red October. We're not exactly sure what this means, but it sounds like things are very, very much heating up. So where would you like to begin?
Okay, well, since I last spoke to you, quite a number of my...
Of course they're messing with the system, the signal.
Everything was going so smoothly.
A number of months ago, we believe. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. There was a little interference. Go right ahead.
Yes, about a year ago, I said that Musk would take a presidential role, and we didn't quite understand how that could happen because obviously he's not an American. But now, of course, we realise that it's this new role that he's going to play in the Department of Government Efficiency. So that's one of the predictions of mine that has come round. Another one that's come round is I said that Mohammed bin Salman, who's a commander-in-chief, in fact, he's called the King Move and Trump's the Queen Move. They're the two top commanders-in-chief of the worldwide military peace plan. I had a vision of him last summer where I saw him in the Arctic and he was surrounded by military, and they were having a meeting which seemed like it was underground with other people from the Middle East. And at the time, I felt like it was something to do with BRICS or something like that. And then about 6 weeks ago, when I did the video about the digital currencies and things like that, and the cross-border payment systems, I said to people that Salman had just announced that Saudi Arabia was going into the BRICS cross-border payment system called mBridge. So that was another one that's come round. So it's quite exciting for me, because when I first put information out, it can sometimes be a little bit controversial at first. And then when you see it come round over the 12-month period, it's interesting. It sort of gives you a little bit of confidence that we can, to a certain extent, see where we're headed. But like you were saying, this month now is going to be, for the USA, it's going to be a little bit complicated because not only do you have the election process going on, you also energetically and astrologically have a lot of contradictions going on. So my astrology friends have been telling me. And so everything's very hyped up, people's emotions, things don't look clear. There's a lot of confusion in the energetic fields, should we say?
Yes, we should say.
Definitely. Well, it's just so interesting to watch the interference taking place in real time. You know, we have, to speak of Musk, he did a poll on Twitter, which was the largest sample size I think anyone's ever really done. Because, who owns Twitter? That's massive. And not a scientific poll, whatever that means.
And not pole dancing.
But I think a really organic, poll. And Trump was over 70%. And, I've been getting 80% in my head for a long time. And I don't know if that's a future thing or if that's in fact where we're at. But it's interesting to watch the Wall Street Journal and, Reuters and all these different polls coming out, and they talk about Kamala Harris having a slight lead and how laughable that is. But it's very much telegraphing the idea that we're going to steal the election, and this is just, kind of
Yeah.
letting you know so that everybody nods along when that happens. Yeah.
So when I've looked at the election about a year ago, they what they've constantly sort of explained to me is that what's going on in terms of the election storyline is just to keep everyone distracted. And so they have about 3 different strategies of how that's going to go on the day. All right. But essentially, what we shouldn't really be focusing on that, even though it's hard not to, because what's really going on is that in the background, we've got this transitional government being set up, which is what Musk is now, taking the role of Department of Government Efficiency for. So he's taking that role. And then you've got Robert Kennedy Jr., who's going to take health ambassador role. And as you've seen recently, he started talking more about vaccines and the chemicals that are in our food. And he's starting to really start talking about health issues a lot more. And so what we're going towards after the election is we're going towards a devolved government, a new kind of setup, a transitional government, and people like Tulsi Gabbard, Ron DeSantis, Robert Kennedy Jr., Musk, they're all going to take ambassador roles, and they're going to have expertise in one particular subject, if you like, and they're going to help the people to start moving these government structures away from what you have currently and down to a process of people deciding what they want. So the whole thing with the elections and who's going to win is just a distraction while they're setting all that up in the background. And so the options that you might have in the end is that, for instance, you might have a hung government. And that won't be because the system has been run fairly. Obviously, what's going to happen again probably is somewhere along the line there's going to be some interference, and you're going to end up maybe with no clear winners. And then for whatever reason, that might create a situation where you have no official leadership. And then that takes you into the transitional government. Because then if you have no official leadership for whatever reason, could be an outside event, could also create a problem. We don't know, it could be a cyber outage, it could be anything. But the idea longer term is that you won't have this 2-party thing going on. You're going to get rid of that by either merging it or removing it completely. And then behind that structure, you've now got everything that I've been talking about for some time. They were calling it the new setup for quite a long time. I didn't know what the new setup was going to be called, but I'm now starting to think it's something to do with this Musk role, this transitional government.
Right.
It's just a template for devolution of governance. So I think that whatever goes on around the election, even though it's all very exciting and we all get, tense, it's actually just leading towards the government being dissolved in its current format. How exactly that's going to go, I don't think anyone absolutely knows, because when I look at that timeline, they've given me about 3 different options. But essentially, it doesn't matter, because it's just all a story until they move us into the new transitional government, which is what's really going on. That's the truth of what's running your country. That behind all of the Harris and the Trump campaigns is a group of people, a transitional team, setting up your new systems.
Well, we've definitely had a clear lack of leadership, and a cascading effect ever since Biden took office. Which is really and to speak of devolution, he's certainly devolving into, we're not sure, like a pool of pastiness on a beach somewhere most of the time. But yeah, it's kind of shocking. I think everyone's looking at each other like, do we have a president? Like who's calling the shots here? This is nuts. because all the the face of this thing, whether it's Harris, whether it's Biden, whether it's Blinken, any of these people, that the incompetence is really out in front, and they all just have this bewildered look, like a deer in headlights. Meanwhile, everything's melting around us, and I suppose that's a great thing, from the sense of I think government has been largely this massive illusion. I don't think the faces that we see are really calling these shots or making these decisions anyway.
Right.
With probably the exception of Trump, who you can see the direct effect of Trump. But it's made for a really interesting cultural phenomenon, where people just devolve to rooting for their team, and rather than asking the hard questions, because the hard questions are that hard right now.
I think the people running the world are the Q team, personally, and I think the Q team oversee Space Operations Command and Space Force, as you understand it. And there's a Space Force in every country. There's a space agency now in every country, and they're all signed in to these protocols for the Worldwide Military Peace Plan, which is something I talked about from about 3 years ago. And at that time, I didn't know what that plan, what the real name of it was. I just said it was a Worldwide Military Peace Plan, and that countries would be signing into it. And then since then, we've seen different space agencies being formed in each country. And we've seen them signing in to, different types of agreements. One of them is called the Artemis Accords. And it basically means that they agree to abide by certain protocols and treaties so that they can join in that cake of the Space Force around the world. So I think the people that are running everything are those people. They're setting up all these systems for us. The devolved decentralized finance, the decentralized voting, and in time you'll have devolved governance in all your countries and in all your states, and all the system will be run by this cybersecurity unit, which is Space Force and Delta. And in each country they have the equivalent, even though they might call it a different name. But when you join all their satellites together, so you obviously have Musk's satellites that everybody knows about, which is now called Starshield, started out as Starlink. And then when the military took it over, it became Starshield. That's the brand. Oh. And then, for instance, in the UK, you've got OneWeb. OneWeb is their version of the satellites going up. And then all the countries that are signing into this peace plan are sending up their satellites, and you join them all together and you create like a cake. And the way that you get the Worldwide Military Peace Plan is that if one part of that cake, so let's say the United Kingdom, in the future didn't abide by the peace treaty, the protocols that they've signed into, which are basically that they abide in the way that they have peace with their citizens and peace with other countries. And if they don't abide by those rules, and that's obviously a very simplistic look at it, but if they don't abide by those two main principles, then they could be locked out by the rest of the cake. So if you think that the cake controls or keeps security for cyber security for your banking system in your country, for your voting system in your country, and for your devolution of governance, then you're not going to be wanting to be locked out. So that's how you create the Worldwide Military Peace Plan in very basic terms. And so that's who I think is running everything. I think Q sit above that. I think Q is a superior team of like software engineers, technical engineers. So things like Snowden, Assange, people like that, that's who I think is in the Q team. And they know how to create this superior computing environment. And then the Space Force, they manage the cybersecurity of that system that they've developed.
Well, I like cake.
Well,
who doesn't love cake? This sounds pretty good so far.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to ask, just because people will wonder when we watch something like the hurricane last week, and if it is the Q team or the white hats, how does something like that? How do we explain that in just the most simple way? Because it's devastating for many people, but maybe there's things that we don't know about it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, somebody that I was speaking to today told me that some of the weather systems are obviously controlled and manipulated. So I'm wondering if we still have some dark factions that are able to manipulate weather, and that might be some aspects of some of the three-letter agencies. And in my next video, I'm going to be looking at one of them that's going to be, in my opinion, disbanded. And I think that one might be the culprit of things like hurricanes still being witnessed if they're being manipulated.
Okay.
But the agencies that are running this cybersecurity, their portions that feed into Space Force, they've already been cleaned out. They're as clean as they can be. You're never gonna have 100% clean departments, but in terms of cybersecurity in any agency, those have been very well sort of vetted, should we say. But some other three-letter agencies, I think, will be disbanded completely, and you won't need them, but that we don't really need them anyway.
Right. I didn't know if you were going to ask something next.
No, I'm still thinking about cake. So I'm kidding. No, it sounds interesting. It sounds like, when we were talking about this before, this may not be an immediate solution. This may not be something that we see the fruits of. I think everybody's kind of on the edge of their seat right now, waiting for election results and this restoration and whatnot. But it sounds like maybe that might not be in the cards.
Well, I think a lot's been going on. It's all been getting set up because, again, obviously, you're focused on the USA, but there is a worldwide military peace plan. So there's lots of layers to get into position. And for all these things to work, we definitely have to have that top layers in place so that when we go live with the financial systems and things and the different layers, that we know that they're safe. So recently I did a video called "The QFS is a Sting Operation." And in that video, I was explaining that QFS is like a placeholder. So all the parts of the QFS, if you think of them over here, they're all being tested to see if they can actually be devolved and in a safe way, so they can't be hacked and manipulated and things like that. So because we don't want to be going back, obviously, to the old systems. And the pieces that they find work will then come over to something called the Q financial system, which is over here and is overseen again by that Space Force, that worldwide Space Force. And at the moment, there's only two pieces over here in America that are under the Q system. Q standing for cybersecurity, right? So you've got X.com banking over here, and you've got the Truth social app, which has just launched the Defiant ones, which is a crypto, which is Trump's crypto, and it's going to run through the X.com banking platform under the Q system. So we've only got two things over here at the moment that they're working on. Okay. Everything else over here, which is called QFS, Quantum Financial System, is just they're just placeholders. They're just test platforms. And the actual banking system, which is another reason why you're seeing Musk now come to the forefront, is because Trump and Musk are putting together the financial system over here, which runs under that Space Force security again.
And remind me, what's the name of the Trump coin or what you just stated?
Yes. So you've got it runs from the Truth Media Group. So you've got the Trump Media Group first. Then underneath that, you've got Truth Social, which is the app that runs with the Truth Media.
Right.
And then the crypto that's going to run from Truth Social. So you have to be on Truth Social to have it.
Right.
It's called the Defiant ones. And if you look at Defiant, DeFi stands for decentralized finance.
Right.
Wow.
Interesting.
I've not heard of that.
This is new.
This is new.
And I anything defiant.
This is why you should be watching my videos.
Our apologies that we're not up on this. That's fantastic information. Now, one thing that I can kind of sense that the audience might be feeling is this idea of a far-reaching global governing body like a Space Force sounds an awful lot like a one world government, which is something that frankly we're all a little bit nervous about.
Right.
So I don't think that's what you're describing, but yeah, maybe you can provide a little clarity there.
So the Space Force is just cybersecurity. And the reason that they're not telling anyone how to do anything, only the countries that are signed in, they're telling them how to act peacefully. They're signing into protocols so that they know how to run the peace plan. And the reason that we need that layer up there is so that everything below it, the banking, the voting, the trade, can then be decentralized to the people. So we can all be on our phones doing our banking directly with that system. We don't need, which isn't telling us what to do. It's just a security blanket. And so we don't need banks. We don't need all these layers of government, because we're in our decentralized app or computer or whatever we're doing. We now talk directly through the star, through the star shield. It does away with all this control that's in the middle. There will be some layers. You do need something in there, but you don't need all of those layers. So you get rid of all the banks, you get rid of all these bureaucracies that we've got going on, the NGOs, all those things. You'll be able to remove them, because the people will be voting from their position of decentralization, devolved governance. And all the military are doing is they're not telling us what to do. That's not their job. What they're doing is they're providing the security for these devolved systems to work, so that we can truly have a voice and we can truly vote for what we want without anything in between, interfering.
Excellent. Well, smaller government is a better government in my book. That sounds pretty fantastic. But it sounds like everyone will have their own autonomy and statehood, probably to a greater degree than we actually have now.
Yes, well, the idea, my understanding is that you in your neighborhood will decide, I don't know, let's make it very simplistic. Let's say you have to decide who's going to come and collect the rubbish, right? Instead of somebody at a government office deciding that, and they choose the person who was able to lobby them at the last government meeting, instead, you're going to sit with your phones, all of you, in your individual houses or mobile homes or wherever you are. And you're just going to say, oh, let's have this guy down the road. He looks like he's a competitive price. He does a good job. And then you will all, vote like that. You won't necessarily know what everyone else is saying. And that will go into that centralized system. And then that's how the contract will be given to that company. You won't need all those government officials that cost a lot of money to be making that decision for you. You will still have some infrastructure because, you know, in case of emergency, you still need certain things to run. So you do need some layers in there, but you don't need all of those layers where a lot of corruption goes on. And if you can just all of you vote individually for what you want, and then it adds it up and creates an answer for you, that's a cheaper way and a more efficient way, and hopefully a fairer way of running countries and states and towns and streets in the future. Now, again, I'm just making that a very simplistic view. It's probably going to be a bit more involved than that. But
Sure.
that devolving governance means they're devolving government to us. So we decide what we want.
Okay.
Well, it's a very rare thing that we see any actual representative government happening these days. You know, I know that was the original plan, but particularly in our country, you can see our government definitely is not aligned with the will of the people and hasn't been for some time. So the idea of peeling off those extra layers of bureaucracy, I think it's as closer to what we might eventually call a representative government. I like that idea.
I'm looking forward to it, actually. I'm looking forward to seeing these new systems run.
Yeah, me too.
Well, so just a quick question to go. So whether Trump is in office or Kamala steals the election and it's a short-term thing, how do you see the military or what have you stepping in a way that you know, because there's going to be people like us and our viewers that are somewhat aware that it's not the normal mainstream media perspective, and then you've got people that still have their Harris Wall signs out in their yard, like many in Eugene, Oregon, where I was last week, and they're just going to be like, "What is going on?" So, is there any insight or anything you could suggest as far as what people might be seeing, regardless of who wins this election?
So I don't know exactly how they're going to do it, but my channeling has always said that you've been under military law already for quite some time.
Okay.
You don't actually have a legitimate government anyway.
Right.
That's just all, and most countries don't.
Right.
It's just all an act. It's just a story to keep everything looking the same,
right,
while they set up everything I've been talking about today, which is obviously a huge task. How they move it from, like you said, whether there's a Harris or whatever going on in the future, I don't know exactly how they're going to do it. But I would imagine that if something crazy happens, like say a hung government or maybe a big cyber outage or something like, you know, I don't know exactly what it's going to be. But something has to obviously force it into the next step, you know, where the people have to start working things out for themselves. It might be like you've just had with the hurricane, when there's a natural disaster or something, not that it necessarily was natural, but when something happens, the people, they pull together. So maybe what they're going to do is they're going to create some situation where people have to pull together, and then they might just say to the people, look, we've not had any leaders now for however long, 6 months, and you've all been managing so well that we're just going to leave it like that. You know, who knows? It depends really on how much they've got set up already in the background, I suppose, and how ready they are to go. The dates that I normally get for the public seeing things is 26, 27. So I still think there's a little bit of a delay yet. So whoever wins the election, whether it's a hung government or, you know, whichever one it is, I still think that's going to run for a little bit longer yet until you get to this point where the people see this devolution in full swing.
Because, you know, we're seeing these videos on TikTok and X, and there's many examples of whether it's helicopters trying, flying in to help the people, bulldozers, what have you, and they're getting turned around, much like Maui. They're not allowed to help the people, and it's really frustrating. And I'm not sure exactly, how that's going to look in other examples after the election, but we're definitely seeing a massive amount of frustration with whether it's government, bureaucracy, FEMA, etc. So it's going to be interesting. Go ahead.
Well, on top of that, I think as far as I understand it, the Biden administration said we're calling on you, America, to help these folks out, because we already gave all of your money and transformers. Like we had a stockpile of transformers for just such an event, where when the power is out and they need to be replaced, we truck them in and they're gone. They went to Ukraine.
So and Biden said that.
Well, he didn't get into the details.
But he
said,
just
we're calling on you to help your neighbors.
Meaning that those
meaning
are gone.
We spent your money.
Right.
Yeah. Like there's no help coming from the government, which, in some ways is reassuring if you think back to what Reagan had to say about, what was it? The most terrifying phrase is, "Hi, we're from the government and we're here to help
you." Yeah.
But
well, the other way you can what's happening, the way you've just described it to me, is that this is forcing people into that situation where they have to go and do it themselves.
Right.
So on one level, that looks like, what's going on. But on a second level, that's starting to get people used to the idea that they actually could have some control over how things turn out. And sometimes people need to be pushed into situations to change, to wake up to that idea. So maybe this is little increments of what things are coming in the future. This might be a sign of the types of things, the types of situations that might occur, so that they can start to devolve this governance, because people will get so frustrated that they'll say, okay, what can we do to fix this ourselves if the government's not coming in to help us? I'm not saying that that's right. I'm just saying that that might be the way, that the strategy that they might use in order to devolve things down to the people, because people might not have the skills at the moment to be able to do it unless they're put in a situation of crisis. So maybe that is like a mini run to see what people do in a situation like that. A bit like when we had the cyber outage a few weeks ago with CrowdStrike. My channeling said that was a white hat plan to see how people would respond in that situation, where their computers were down, flights were down, everything was down.
Right.
Like a mini run of what could happen and what would people do in that situation. So I think some of these things are being set up just to get people used to the idea that actually we shouldn't be waiting on the government, because in the future we're devolving it. We're having devolution of governance, which means that we do it. So not only do we decide what we want, but we also get involved in what we want, instead of putting it the other way and then having all these layers of bureaucracy that just waste money and end up being corrupt.
Right. And whether it's CrowdStrike or this hurricane, which, Lewis Herms from Screw Big Gov, there's an interesting post in our Telegram showcasing how there was another hurricane that was roughly 66 years ago, 6 months and 6 days. It was insane as to how much that was congruent with each other. Or, looking back at Maui, and we haven't talked since Maui. Can you give a little insight on your take and what you've said about the whole Maui incident that might tie into what we're watching down in Florida right now?
Oh, that's a long time ago. I can't remember what I said about Maui.
Well, whether it was natural, not natural, just just a kernel, just something along those lines.
You see, the thing with channelings like that is they don't give me information on things like that, as in the way that the audience would want to hear it. But what I have been told is what that brought up was conversations about people like Oprah Winfrey and things like that. And so what that did lead me into was a video about the Hollywood perpetrators would go into something called quantum borders. So there was a little bit of a discussion about whether Maui and things was something to do with that idea. Now, quantum border, they've explained to me, is where, dependent on what level of crime has been committed, you'll have different levels of access to work and freedom. So, for instance, if you were, say, a Hollywood person who got caught up in everything that was going on in Hollywood, but not through any fault of your own. And what I mean by that is, if you were 12 years old when you got signed into Hollywood and you didn't really have a choice, you were just a child, then they're not going to be prosecuting you for things that you couldn't get out of because you were a child.
Right.
And so what they might do in that instance is those people are probably been giving information to the white hats. And so they would be in a quantum border for their safety. And so they would be in one area. And what that would mean is that if they travel anywhere, that they will be tracked, but for their safety. Then the perpetrators that were making the children or the other people in Hollywood do the things they didn't really want to do because they were blackmailing them, saying they're going to hurt their families or whatever, they will be in a quantum border that's secured. So they might, still have a house and they might still look like they're doing normal everyday things, but actually their money's been stopped, their ability to earn, and they can't fly anywhere or something like that. So these quantum borders will be your modern day imprisonment, if you like. So that was something that I got after I was asking about that whole Hollywood, Maui, blue roofs and all that, that I can remember because that was quite a long time ago now. And you're also going to find that a lot of what they've explained to me is a lot of the people that you thought were perpetrators were actually sting operations. So they were in there. So an example might be, for example, it might be that it turns out that Oprah Winfrey, for example, it might turn out that she's been in there deliberately all this time getting the information. And so, yes, she's had to have been seen with all of those people, because if you think about it, she was one of the best people that had access to that.
Right.
Because she was a chat show host. She was already in that circle. So what you might find is in time that some of the people that you thought were bad players weren't bad players. They were in with bad players to get the information, because somebody's got to go in and get the information.
Right.
And I think that was when I did the video called that Epstein was a sting operation. I think not a lot of, but some of the people involved in the Epstein list would have been the same. They would have been going in to get the information, because if you don't have somebody going in, you can't get the information back. And if they were doing that, they're also going to be in a quantum border because they need to be protected. And a quantum border just basically means that you are people know where you are at all times for your safety, and that if you fly somewhere, it's known, and that they can keep you safe. And if you're in the bad part of the quantum border, you're going to have restriction. And dependent on how bad you are, depends on what the restriction is. So some people, and I'm just making an example, I don't know which one they are for sure, but let's say you're Ellen DeGeneres, and let's say that she's not been totally bad, but she's not been totally good. Then what they might do with her is they might stop her earning any more money. They might just say, okay, we're going to put you in this quantum border. You can sit there for the rest of your life in that house, but you can you can't work anymore to that level that you were earning before. There could be different types of restrictions that they give depending on what level of crime or intel they were giving.
Right.
So that's something that came out of that the Blue Roofs situation.
That's great. We haven't heard it explained quite like that. And I guess what you're saying about, like, if Diddy is an adult and he lures Bieber in, and I literally thought, maybe I was naive when I heard about this Justin Bieber kid becoming a YouTube sensation. I was like, oh, well, that's cool, not really knowing what's going on. But here he is, this young kid. And then you have people like Scott and I, that we're not trying to really in any way, shape, or form be any kind of sensation at all. I mean, we're not in our,
we just can't
20s.
help it.
We but we can't keep a YouTube channel. We watched our numbers just completely be squashed. We just can't help it. We're trying. So Scott and I are secretly a boy band.
No,
Yeah.
we're a man band.
A man band.
Got to get that part right. It's
Who's the man?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, no, I appreciate the breakdown, because it's just
Well, yeah, there's the contrast, because we're all rather familiar with the Epstein boomerang,
right,
and how it hasn't come around just quite yet,
and we hear about Charlie Freak, which we
before we get there,
right.
I mean, Ghislaine is allegedly languishing in a in prison at the moment. None of the people on the Epstein list have been revealed or held accountable publicly. But here we have this P. Diddy case, which is, a whole nother
level
example of this, with a lot of participants who are quaking in their boots. We have, a lot of celebrities deleting their Twitter accounts, and some leaving the country, and, that kind of a thing. So we know it's definitely not without significant impact. I'm hoping that maybe this will bring the Epstein boomerang back around, because it seems like those players are maybe at another level. But I don't know. Have you been following the P. Diddy thing? I mean, I realize that's kind of an American phenomenon.
So obviously I'm aware of it, but I haven't been following it blow by blow. It's all a bit salacious, isn't it? I did see a little bit of, the what are they calling those marathon sexual nights? What was he calling it?
The freak off. Yeah.
Freak off. I did see a little bit of that and decided, I don't really want to listen to it. I think we all kind of know what's been going on. But I think again that what we have to be aware of is that in amongst all of these stories, there will have been people strategically placed in there to get information back. Somebody has to get that information back somehow. And I've also said for quite some time that when you see these satanic concerts, that's another way to wake people up. They're actually doing white hat work. Right. Because they're coming into people's lounges at 5 o'clock when they're having their tea on their lap on MTV, with Sam Smith or something with horns and red and blood, and it's all very inappropriate, and they need to do that and be so overtly obvious so that they can wake people up to what this agenda is. And so what you're finding is you're getting different people from different levels of society trying to reach different layers of the public. So not everybody's going to watch MTV, and not everybody's going to watch this, or not everybody's going to engage with something else. So you have to have different types of people being ambassadors for different things. So you have to have some of Hollywood and some of the actors and singers actually looking like they're playing bad people or doing bad things, so that they can get the story out to people. They can get the message out. But they might not actually be involved with all of that. It's just part of what they've agreed to help.
Right.
But we're not probably going to know who's who for a little while yet, but I think further down the line,
Right.
you're probably going to see. I mean, I saw something yesterday where P. Diddy had a T-shirt on from when he was very young, basically announcing what's happening right now. So then you have to ask yourself,
Oh,
is
wow.
even this bit scripted?
Right.
You
Well,
know,
it's interesting you said, because there's an account that we follow on from our X account on TrueStream. It's Liz_Churchill10. And it said this. This is a recent post from yesterday. The P. Diddy list includes names linked to the pharmaceutical industry. The names that we're going to name are names that will shock you. I'm looking at banks, pharmaceutical companies, and hotels. And this is something that we reposted in our Telegram, which we suggest people go to, because while we can't talk about everything and update every post in our Rumble live streams, it's things like this where people can go for updates. But it is really interesting to start seeing the epicenter of Diddy and where all of these things are connected. And then even hearing that they talked about the whatever sex lube used at these parties. Well, it was actually GHB. I mean, it was like a liquid ecstasy, so that these people would be doing things that they may not normally have done, and then they're captured on video and then blackmailed. And if there's kids there, but you're right, it's going to be really interesting to learn about these different artists or musicians or actors that were compromised at a very young age, and they have no way. How do you, if you're MK Ultra and you're threatened and blackmailed, and if you say anything that you or your loved ones are going to be killed, what do you do with that? And
yeah.
it sounds like somehow they have ways to track that to some extent. So
I think you have to look behind what the intention was of each person. If the intention behind the person was to be a predator, and there's no denying it, then obviously they have to be punished to the greatest extent that they can be. But then when you're that person that was given a horse sedative in your drink when you went to a party, and you were 15 years old or 20 years old, it doesn't really matter. If someone's drugged your drink and you've just gone along for a party, and then you get put into a compromising position, like you just said, and then you're blackmailed, you have to sort of look at all of the facts then, don't you? Because then it starts to spiral out of control. Because when you're 20, you don't have the skills to understand that threat. You just don't want your family hurt, or you don't want that exposed, what you did. You don't necessarily know how to manage that. And then it just all spirals after that, doesn't it? That it just gets out of control. And I assume that the things that they then get you to do after they've caught you on camera or whatever increases.
right.
So I think it just depends on where the intention began, who was the original perpetrator and why. And you could even say who was behind it, even if P. Diddy was the perpetrator, you might need to ask yourself, who was behind that? What had he been blackmailed with? We just don't know how far in it goes. We don't know who's behind everything. We're going to find everything out by the sounds of it, though.
Yeah, so many layers and levels. And I know we're trying to keep this roughly an hour today, and there's about 12 or 15 minutes left. Anyway, what were you
Well, I had a thought for starters. When you mentioned horse sedative, I don't think you were referring to Tim Walsh. That was another matter that we can get into at another time. But
and that wasn't a sedative.
no, it
started with
the opposite.
But it sounded like He-Man.
But I do often wonder. Pardon the traffic. I do often wonder if it, because you hear about the astonishing immorality, and that's putting it very lightly. There's probably a much better word for it that these people are engaging in for whatever reason, and I think we have enough examples without going into it.
Right.
That the biggest disconnect is how could anyone, when we search our own feelings and whatnot, how could anyone participate in such monstrous behavior? And I have to wonder if it isn't centered around taking a drug, adrenochrome or something like that, and having it kind of reordering your morality on some level. I mean, to a lesser extent, I think cocaine does that for folks, to a very limited extent. So that very much could be a part of the mechanism that gets people in situations where then they're trapped. Not to excuse any of it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things involved. I think there is dark magic involved. I think there's technology involved in sending frequency to people. Then you've got the basics, like you said, of putting something in people's drinks or something like that. I think it's a combination of things. I don't think it's an easy one size fits all. I think there's a lot of things that are mixed up in there somehow. And I just think that once you get in it, particularly with these Hollywood contracts and things, I think it's just very difficult. It's a bit like years ago, they used to have the casting couch and women couldn't get into Hollywood unless they did the casting couch. But it's just stepped up a bit now because it's involving drugs and all sorts of other things, but it's not really much different to where they started with the casting couch.
Right.
It's still a manipulation, to get people to do things that they shouldn't have to do.
Right. And at the start, we went over a few topics we wanted to discuss, and I think we've covered most of them. There was something that you mentioned about, I don't think we've touched on this since we started the live, is the toroidal field component. Is that something you wanted to cover? Because we don't want to leave anything out that are some of like the most, recent things you're working on.
No stone unturned. Yeah.
So a lot of my work, in case people are wondering why they don't see me very often, is now over at locals.com, because if I put anything anywhere, it gets taken down. I've lost 4 platforms in the last 4 years. You just get your numbers up and then overnight it just gets taken down.
It's awful.
It's hard work. And so I've been with locals.com for about a year now, and they don't censor anything. So people don't like having to come to Locals, but if you want to see all of these things I'm talking about in their full extent, then you do actually need to come away from YouTube and things like that, because we can't post it over there. The bounce thing that you're talking about, the toroidal field, was something where I just stumbled across it. Actually, I was asking, did SpaceX or Musk or anything have any new sort of technologies coming? And they started explaining to me that the satellites in space SpaceX are trying to make a system where they can charge each satellite like naturally, okay? And in the natural fabric of the universe is something called the toroidal field. It's an energetic field. And Tesla was aware of it because when he made the Tesla coils, where he was capturing electricity, he was pulling it down through the toroidal field. He was bringing it into the Tesla coil from the toroidal field. And it seems that SpaceX are trying to replicate that in space at the moment. They're trying to get this toroidal field energy and harness it so that each satellite recharges itself naturally. But not only are they trying to do that, they're trying to then bounce that amount of recharge to the next satellite. So with no wires attached or anything like that, they just bounce this recharge electricity from one to the next. And then as I was learning about that, they explained to me that that could then be replicated on the ground. So instead of us having, all these wires and electricity pylons and things like that, you could just have a Tesla coil located in your town or whatever, And then you could bounce the energy from one Tesla coil to the next to create free power. So this is not new. We've known about Tesla coils and things for some time. But what they seem to be telling me is that they're already experimenting with this idea now in SpaceX. And they called it the bounce system only because when they were drawing it for me, they were showing how it bounces from one to the next to create the recharge. Now, I don't know if it's going to be called the bounce system because they just explain it to me in simplistic terms so that we understand it. But it will be fun to see how that unravels and to see if maybe in a year's time they start unraveling that and giving it a name and we start seeing that announced, because normally I get things about a year in advance. So that's a nice positive thing that's coming. So in amongst all this salacious Hollywood drama, we've got a lot of nice things going on. We've got that free energy system being designed. We've got the new financial systems and cross-border payment systems being designed. And that will mean that the CBDCs on the new system, which I recently channeled, called Mbridge, will also be overseen by the military. So the central banks are going to, in time, will go, and the CBDCs will come under that queue system that I was explaining earlier in this chat. So where people have been concerned about CBDC, they thought it's going to be run by central banks. It's not going to be run by central banks in the longer term. Initially, the banks are there because they have to get it up and running, but it's all again being overseen by that Space Force system. So there's a lot of good things going on as well, and often my channeling tends to help us to look at those things rather than get too involved in some of these other storylines, which on the surface are quite dark and pressing. But again, when you pull them apart, there could be reasons why they had to go a certain way. Because, why did P. Diddy have that T-shirt like 30 years ago?
Yeah, I'm curious as to what that T-shirt is, because I don't think I've seen it.
What did that say?
Yeah.
Do you recall?
Do you recall what
it had an image of him on The Simpsons.
Oh.
Or something like that on the T-shirt.
Okay.
He looked about 20 years old, and his hair at that point used to stick upwards. I don't really know P. Diddy, but his career or anything.
Yeah, you don't strike me as the type that would.
nor are we. Yeah.
Well, two questions I think to tie this up. One is, where can people find you, and the other is, with your intuitive powers, when do you see Truth Stream and Michelle Fielding and maybe Mark Atwood getting together over in the UK or Ireland at some point and doing some kind of cool event?
That would be good. Well, as I said, it's difficult for me to post in the normal places like YouTube, things like that. So the best way to find me is to either find me on my Telegram channel, which will then direct you to where everything is, or to come and find me at locals.com. Now, there's some free stuff on locals.com, but my very latest videos, that you normally have to subscribe for those, and they work out, I think it's something like $5 a month or something like that to watch all my videos. So there is a little bit of a subscription on some of it, but the rest of the stuff is free. And I do put some things on YouTube, but they're normally a year later, because by the time I put them on, then they're not so controversial. So YouTube are a little less. They're still deleting stuff that I put up 4 years ago. I'm still getting warnings. Dissemination. Things I talked about with Nick Veniamin, literally 3 or 4 years ago, I'm still getting stuff taken down, and you get that warning, where it says we're going to terminate. And that's still going on. And they do it every time I post on YouTube, regardless of what I post. So it's a warning to me, basically. Don't post too many things because we're going to terminate you.
Yeah, no, also your link tree is I think a link access to all of these sites,
Yeah.
correct? And I just want to let the viewers know we don't have that problem on YouTube anymore with the warnings because they took the entire channel down. We don't have to worry.
and we weren't about to try again. You know, it's hey, having to talk in pantomime and you know, play a game of charades with the audience.
I'm enough of a clown for Scott to deal with.
It's just not dignified. It really isn't. And you know, we've embraced locals as well, and we're hoping that our audience will follow suit and embrace locals. This very interview may make its debut on our locals to begin with. It's I think wonderful tool.
Once people, the thing about locals is you get your dedicated followers on there, so you don't get as much. You don't get in fact, you don't get any of that ridiculous comments that you get on YouTube. You know, you don't get all that abuse. You don't get people just saying any old thing for the sake of it. At least the people that are paying to see you, they actually want to hear what you've got to say. And so, you know, it's a very nice atmosphere there because you don't have to put up with all of that trolling and and if people make a comment, you haven't got 25 people underneath it being rude and saying, you know, like you get on YouTube.
Well, I think we've covered all the topics we were intending on covering.
I think so. Is there anything we may have left out, or anything else you'd like to say in parting, Michelle?
Oh, just to sort of sign off, I think everyone's very frustrated, confused, feeling a bit worn out with everything, particularly around this election time. And I think if you just remember that everything that you're seeing is just a story, and it's still for the people that don't know what's going on. And it's just a placeholder where they're getting all this good stuff that I've been telling you about today set up. And it seems like it's taking a long time, but it's because it's so important to get that cybersecurity right. So that when they do hand it all over, it's safe and we keep it as a white hat plan and it doesn't get infiltrated again. So even though it's painful, very painful, if you understand that's what the delays are, there is lots going on. It is getting set up, but they just have to make absolutely sure that we don't end up giving the system to the bad players. And so we had a confirmation there. Did you hear it? It bleeped. When even for me, you know, like you said, when I channel things down, I'm lucky that I can ask and get some information. They don't tell me everything, obviously, but it does help to calm people down when they hear what I'm saying. But even I get, you know, overwhelmed with all these things as well, because like I was saying before, the energetics that are going on, the solar storms and the upgrades that are going on with energies, even those on their own are a lot to manage right now. So I think everyone needs to just look after themselves, take a rest if they need to, perhaps not sign in too much to these storylines like P. Diddy, because they can get a bit much, can't they?
Yeah. You know, having mentioned the solar storms, I'm wondering, have you how do you feel about any massive you know, like people talk about the event, they talk about you know, some solar phenomenon that you know, a lot of different versions that it may reorder our DNA entirely, or you know, dimensionally bifurcate our species. I don't know. What do you think?
So the way I don't ever get that story, I don't get told there's going to be like a big flash or anything. That doesn't mean that might not happen, of course. But the way that they explain it to me is that we're all on different paths. So if you think of it like a spiritual mountain, some of us are nearer the top than others. And when you're at the top, you can see all around, you can see everything. And then the others are coming up at different levels on all up the side. So if you're on this side of the mountain, you can't see everything that's going on. You can only see your perspective. And the way that I see the energies is that as we get another influx, and I see them as influxes, not one big event, with each influx, the people will gradually start making their way up the mountain because their consciousness will rise each time there's an influx. But people will be at different levels. So when they say it's going to split, it's split in the sense that people are just at different levels on the mountain. No one's better than anyone else. It's just we're all at different stages of that journey. And each time we have an upgrade, we get moved up another layer. And then the people that are at the front are already at the top, helping everyone to come up, guiding them. Come on, up you come. Here we are. This is where you need to be, sort of thing. I don't actually see it happening like a big event like that, personally.
Now we're back to cake, layered cake. I like it. That may be the title of this.
Yeah, layered cake.
I
There we
like
go.
it. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Beautiful.
thank you so much. It really has been too long. We need to do our best to make sure the next time we see you is much sooner,
Right.
and
then
maybe in person. That would be
right.
lovely.
And then it
Yeah.
seems like you keep getting younger somehow. So
Yeah, we want that secret.
whatever.
We'll talk about it off camera for sure.
Awesome.
All right.
Very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Take
Cheers.
care. Bye. Bye.